Alright, next video we're going to do here is to show you how to do some inlays on a Les Paul standard fretboard. And I've got my templates from Ronnie over at Guitar Building Templates. What's nice about the Les Paul standard 59 is that it comes with a bunch of templates for even routing the inlays. So these fit nicely in here. They're cut to size. All you do is line these up and route. What I'm going to do is make some man-made turquoise inlays here. I bought these a couple years ago and actually never did anything with them. So I'm going to make the inlays out of this. I've got a Honduran Rosewood fretboard. It's nice and bright. Really pingy. And then I've got that Les Paul body I've been sitting on for the last year that I'm going to put this on. So first things first is I'm going to fret the fretboard. I've got the StuMac template here, and I've got a pin in my template that'll pop this on and cut the frets. If you don't have the fret saw blade, you can just get a handsaw and cut. You can buy the ruler. Mark it off on the fretboard, get the fret saw, put a block, and saw, and just keep moving along the lines. That'll work perfectly. So first things first, this is a 1/4 inch fretboard. I've got one clean edge here, which is the side I'm going to cut on. I'm going to get this lined up. What's nice about this template, there's two different scale Gibson fretboards. There's the 24 and 5/8 or the 24 and 3/4. I'm going with the 24 and 5/8. You get this lined up. And I've got my double stick tape here. Make sure this is level on my straight edge. So how these templates work is that I built a custom sled, and there's a little indexing pin right there, and what you do is you use the template on the pin, get it lined up, push through the saw, move it over, and push through the saw again. So it's relatively quick. Instead of cutting it by hand, which takes 20-25 minutes sometimes, this takes about 30 seconds. So we're all set here. We'll move this over. Alright, next here we're going to mark the center line. So next we've got our center line on both sides, and what I'm going to do is take the template here on the back side and fix this on with the double stick tape. That way I've got each template lined up correctly here. So I'm going to take the tape off and apply this on. This is my pin runner setup. It's the Dremel drill press with an 1/8 inch bit and a little 1/8 inch pin, and this is how I use it to route out inlays. Alright, next thing you do is you get your chisel and you clean out the corners. It's really simple. You just make a square bit. So you'll need a really sharp chisel. Here I'm using my Narex chisels. These chisels were the highest rated, best value chisels out of fine woodworking a couple of years ago. They're extremely sharp. Really enjoy using them. I bought the whole set, and it really makes, chiseling this fine work out pretty quick. So this is kind of, again, a back and forth process. We are cleaning out the corners. So with that 1/8 inch bit, you have a corner that you have to clean out on each side. And this is really just a back and forth, cleaning this out, making sure you're getting that inlay to fit properly. So next we're going to speed up the video here to keep things moving along, and we're going to show you how I do a couple more inlays here with the Dremel tool. I route down between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. If you go down too deep, you'll lose the structural integrity of the board, and if you don't go deep enough, when you sand over with that 12-degree block, you'll show the corners here. So you just gotta it's a perfect balance to make sure you're doing it correctly. The right size is about somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8. Next thing we're going to do here is we're going to size up the inlay then. And we get the template and we're going to draw it out on this piece of turquoise. Next I'll use my jigsaw here to rough cut the inlay out. Got the jigsaw set on a slower speed, and I'll just take my time and slowly cut this. I'll cut off the ends and where the curves are right before I take it to go ahead and sand. So here I've got a higher grit sand roll, about an 80 grit, and this is where I really rough sand this out. Maybe this is 120. Next we'll clean up each edge here on my little 8-inch sander. Just sand right to the edge of the block. I've got a backing board so I get really close to the edge here. You can't do this with the smaller pieces, only with these bigger pieces. So the first one's a tad tight. I think it's tight on the edge here, so what I'm going to do is just sand this down on a little block sander I've got right. So now this slides right in. Fits perfectly. Just a little bit on each edge, and once I epoxy it in, the epoxy will spill out and I'll get a perfect fitting inlay. As I get to the smaller pieces here, all I'm going to do is really draw this out on all the corners. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sand it by hand. It's actually too dangerous to put the stick tape on here and hold it. So I'm going to do all the sanding here by hand. Here's the sandpaper that has the stickum on it on my granite plate. And this is where I'm taking the inlays over to sand the top and the bottom to get them flush so they'll fit in the channel that I routed out. Next we're going to take this 5-minute epoxy and we're going to rub it in. We're just going to push the inlays down. You only want to do a little bit of time because it's 5-minute epoxy. If you mix too much epoxy, it'll get hard. So you just want to use a little bit. And definitely don't over glue.
So when the epoxy is all mixed in, you take it and you work it into the corners and you work it on the bottom. You can either use toothpicks or popsicle sticks. I've used screwdriver heads in the past, screw heads. You don't have to mask off the fretboard because you still got a lot of work in sanding it down. So you're just going to work around on the corners, and then what you do is you take the inlay and just slowly push it down. So you take it, slowly push it down here, and push. Then what you do is you take the epoxy and you make sure all the corners then are clean and kind of filled in so you don't get any gaps. You know, if there's a little bit of a gap. You just work your way down the line here, mixing a little bit of epoxy every couple minutes so it doesn't get too hard.
There we go. They're all glued in. We'll let this sit for 24 hours and we'll sand these down. Alright, here we're going to rough shape the fretboard on my Craftsman 13-inch bandsaw. I'm just going to cut off the end here and then run this down and cut off any waste. I'll size this up before I take it to the table router. So now we're going to go to my custom table router here and just route off the edge that's left under the template from using the bandsaw.
Then I'm going to put a little strip of binding iron, so I take the Stumac binding bit with the largest washer and just run this off on the side to get that binding channel, so I size this correctly for binding.
Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the cream binding and glue it on here. So I've got it already pre-cut. I've got all my tape lined up here. This is pretty simple. All I'm going to do is take a little bead of glue along the binding here and just press it on. Don't need a lot of glue, you just need a little bit. Here I took this block sander and sanded down the inlays so that I could then take it to my fret radius machine and radius to that 12 degrees. This is my fret radius machine that I've used on my fretboards. I'll actually do another video describing how this was built. The guy that sold me this isn't really selling them anymore, but it's a pretty nice machine. You can see I've got just a 1/2 inch bit, 1/4 inch shank, and I'm just going over with that 12-degree radius on the rails as it's set up here. It's pretty nice. We'll go ahead then and fast forward the video here for a little bit and show you how it works.
So next I get my Stumac fretboard beam. It's a 12-degree aluminum fretboard beam, and I just start with 180 grit, and I sand to get all the lines out from using that tool. So the router and that bit leaves some scratch marks in the inlays and on the fretboard, and this helps me sand off any of those scratches. You can see the sawdust start to accumulate here. And what I'm going to do next is grab my vacuum, and every couple minutes what I'll do is I'll vacuum up the sawdust, make sure that the sandpaper stays clean and the fretboard stays clean from all the dust. This helps sand a lot better when you keep it clean. So I'll get my vacuum cleaner and just vacuum this up here. So I'll fast forward through a little bit, speed up the video. I'm going to clean up. I'm going to pull the other sandpaper off here in a second. Now this is 240 grit. You don't need a whole lot of sanding after this. Alright, so last thing I'm going to do here is I take this Stumac fret cleaning saw. It's actually a really nice tool. I had been previously using the end of my fret saw, and this is actually really small. It's handy. It gets into the corners. I'm using this to clean out all the glue and all the dust. So this is a really nice tool. It gets the fret bed really nice and level, and it's a really neat tool. I'm actually really happy with it. You can see how sharp these teeth are here. I'm just going to go back and forth and really clean up the fretboard. So that's the making of my Les Paul standard fretboard with the blue turquoise inlays. Got the cream binding. I'm going to glue this on once I set the neck, make sure I can get this lined up properly, and we'll show you the guitar when it's done.